Thank you all for coming here. My name is Kate Reed. I'm the Director of Programs here at Tempest. We have 4 fantastic artists here in Charms Against Harm, our most recent exhibition. And so I'm just going to pass it to the artists to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the questions. Whoever would like to go first, please.
I'm 𝘾𝙖𝙨 𝘼𝙤𝙣. Are we supposed to talk to sing?
And just gesture towards your art so everyone knows, like,
okay.
Yeah, what you made.
Mine is that one, the tiny brooch over there, the frog eggs in the back, and then this movable clothespin piece. Yeah.
Hi, I'm 𝘾𝙖𝙨 my work is this one, the piece over there, and the piece, the canvas piece over there.
Hi, I'm Rose, and I have the squishy piece back there, the big doll, and the little guy in that nook over there.
I'm Jen 𝙅𝙚𝙣 and I did the textile pieces, these 2, that one in the corner, that one and that one.
Fantastic. Okay, so diving right into things, one of the most, the strongest, wait, can we close the doors? Sorry guys.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's too loud. It's too loud. Okay. Yay, okay. So one of the most striking kind of collective aspects about this show is like the color theme, which is so bright and active and like pointed, in addition to these like craft elements. And something that has kind of emerged in our initial conversation is the idea of play and experimentation as a way of being led by materials. So I was just wondering if we could start off with a story about how in your art practice, was there a moment of like playful experimentation which kind of unlocked a new discovery in your work? Whoever would like to begin first.
I can start us off. I feel like play, thanks. Play is very important to me. I try to make sure that my process has a lot of space for like decisions to be made really far into making something. So like making the wooden structures, I'll first like cut the wood and do some sketching and then kind of play around with them and then staple them together so I can still kind of rip the staples out and like shift it. I try not to make any like permanent moves until almost like very far into something, because I think I'm trying to like enjoy the act of making as much as possible before I actually because as soon as I make something permanent, some of that play is like lost. You have to kind of fulfill it as like a new function, like you're trying to like solve it versus like, just playing around with the materials. Mm-hmm. So that's a real important part of it to me.
So part of the play is just at what point do I kind of lean into a decision, mm-hmm. because it forecloses other possibilities.
Yeah, like nailing it down. It's like a different type of play, but not as fun, not as like experimental. Yeah.
Very cool.
I think similar to Kate, like part of the play is in the process for me as well. But in these pieces in particular, they're kind of based off of childhood, and like the materials kind of reflect that too. So especially with the clothespin piece, it's like very crafty, but trying to figure out how to like disassemble a clothespin and experiment with that, that is kind of where the playfulness comes in. So not just like conceptually, but also through the process as well.
To see, for example, like what could this material be other than its normal function?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how do I abstract it to a point where like it kind of looks like clothespins, but it's not, it's not the same function as it was before.
Very cool.
And for me, I think this whole foray into textiles, it's new for me, and it kind of came out of a desire to find a hobby. And so, and then I immediately turned away from hobby and just started making work out of it. But yeah, that was entirely just like a search for something lighter to do in my free time, and it did not pan out. So.
Well, it's interesting because your form of play became so pleasurable that you're like, well, it has to be more part of my life.
Exactly that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar to what everyone else is saying, I feel like play is just a pretty essential part of my art making practice. I feel like pretty much everything I do, there's play involved because I'm always just like, well, you know, what would it look like if I changed this or this, you know, because I work pretty instinctually. So I feel like, yeah, it's definitely a part of like everything.
Do you feel like because you're in this kind of like mental space of play that the stakes are lower and it allows you a certain freedom you might not otherwise have?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So moving almost kind of in a similar thread, one thing that stood out about the show is the use of craft materials. And craft materials as being one of the first artistic languages so many of us have because it's what we are exposed to as children. And I know, Casey, you teach children in a way as well. So I was just curious if we could kind of explore how craft as a material that you use in your art practice connects to your past and also to your present.
Yeah, like you said, I teach children now, so I don't know, I feel like I have this idea of like, it's not about necessarily how expensive or how high grade the material you use is in your art. It's more about, do you know the technique and do you have the skill for it? And so there's no shame in using like cheaper craft materials. And conceptually it worked out for me because craft materials are like fun to play around with, and because they're more affordable and accessible, you get to do more experiments with them, which I'm sure, I don't know, you guys might agree, like you get to kind of try different things. Yeah, and because my stuff is kind of based off of childhood and I grew up as like an arts and crafty like little kid, that worked out for me to like use that material. Yeah.
I do like what you said about like the preciousness of, or less precious nature of like some of the craft materials, and like when I was painting, I wasn't like coming across like tubes of, you know, archival paint, but in my day-to-day life and work, I do come across fabrics and things like that that I can breathe a new life into, and then it also just helps me feel better about, you know, reducing waste, keeping things out of landfills. I mean, these will probably be in landfills eventually, but at least they're getting a little time before they get there. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like using craft materials, it wasn't necessarily something that I like planned out, but it just kind of happened eventually. And because I used to mostly paint, and then I got into sculpture like 5 years ago. And like I feel like polymer clay is kind of the material that has kind of been my default. And I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that. But yeah, I mean, I was just kind of drawn to craft materials, and then I was like, oh, this goes with my themes and my imagery and what I'm talking about and trying to say. So it's kind of a happy coincidence that I feel drawn to these materials, and they kind of allow me to be playful and experiment.
Do you feel like it allows you to enter into the space of childhood? Like, is that something that you would, like, is polymer clay something that you would use as a kid, or like, what was your kind of like first material?
Probably just drawing. Yeah, I don't think I used polymer clay as a kid.
Okay, just curious. Yeah, I personally, I moved from working with my hands into drawing, so I kind of had the reverse.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's something really special about that joy that comes through one's first arts and crafts course of a kind.
I just want to say also, I feel like the craft material, like, it has a different strength. Like, there are different strengths to using craft material versus using like harder core. Like, even looking at Rose's sculpture, like, it's almost like the material you use, that it like looks like clay for the larger sculpture, but it wouldn't be like, you can't make something like that out of clay necessarily. Like, I feel like clay or sometimes craft materials or things that are like in that category function a lot better for like, I don't know, like getting your gestures down or something. And then if you need something that just like needs to hold up more or like can build, you can like build over like a structure or like, you know, build larger, then you can like practice like a lot of the metal on this painting is like craft metal, like tooling foil that I get from Blick. And it reads as like very heavy metal, and I've been heavy metal, but like I've been working with heavier metal now, and there's so much less dexterity with it. Like it's so much harder to bend, but it does. I mean, like it's much more legible as like a heavier duty thing, and so that's kind of the course like craft has, I don't know, taken me, and it's nice to see it in other people's work too, like working with something, getting something down, and then like building up into different textures later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking about craft as like a category, but also as literally meaning the way in which you create something, and that it has a dual, it unlocks your ability to like use things in new ways, but it also allows a kind of accessibility to create something that you might not be able to do if you were using, I don't know, for example, like if you were welding or you were using true tin, but we can talk about all the different ways, you know, material experimentation. One thing that would be great to talk about, we have many different scales of work in the show, and I was just curious if we could chat about how scale plays a role in like the emotional impact of the work, and how playing with scale impacts you as a maker, and maybe how audiences receive it. What do you guys think about scale in your work?
So my default tends to be to work pretty small, like making this large doll sculpture. That was kind of the first really large sculpture I've ever made. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, because I make a lot of these like little, like small sculptures that are almost kind of, they're reminiscent of like figurines or like little, you know, little household tchotchke sort of things. So I guess they have like very different associations, which then, you know, impacts how you perceive them. Because it's like if they remind you of little household things, then you're like, oh, these are so cute. And then making something a lot larger, it has a very different impact because it's more like, oh, this is like larger than a human. And I mean, with that sculpture, she's meant to be a protector statue. So the larger size is more reminiscent of statues. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like that message comes across better because she is larger, so then it's like she's better able to protect or whatever.
One thing I love about this sculpture is that the diminutive sculptures are in the same context as the larger one, and they rest on the arms, on the head, and in this interior cavity. Yeah, so how do you feel like the mixing of them together, it's almost as if they're protecting the smaller sculptures, or like what would you say that the figure is protecting?
So it's supposed to be a metaphor. It represents, like the big sculpture represents me becoming my own protector and my own guardian and the protector of others. So the smaller sculptures, I think of them as like babies or creatures. It's not really like a super direct metaphor necessarily, because I don't necessarily think I'm like, I don't know, protecting anything like in real life or whatever. But yeah, but I mean, I don't know if they really represent anything specifically, but they're babies, they're creatures, they're kind of like different, they represent like different emotions, they're kind of their own beings.
Yeah, I love having the kind of intimacy of being able to experience the emotion that they're conveying, and the very specific just aura that each individual one has. It's like quite delightful. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I used to make big pieces, so I'm the opposite of Rose, where like I'm used to making really tall like ceramic pieces, and that were usually taller than me, and I would like hide behind them. And I think I feel like I've almost like progressed to smaller, more intimate pieces because I started delving more into like, I don't know, being more intentional about like what imagery do I want to convey, and like pulling from, you know, my inner child or childhood. And that is like a very, I think, tender process for me. And so having maybe pieces that are not as like loud in color, and they're maybe smaller, yeah, or like more minimal in a way. I think that's what I think about for the scale of my pieces. Yeah.
I think it's nice, it's interesting to hear why people like make smaller things. I could so imagine that like when I make smaller drawings, like it does kind of, or like when you see smaller works out in the world, it does invite you in. And like you were saying with the tchotchkes or with the skill of your sculptures, like you start thinking about like the analogs in your life that are like a similar size, and then like what they make you feel, like keepsakes, or like there's like an intimacy to that. I think my journey with the work has been like a very physical, been really enjoying like the physicality of working large, just like in my body. Like I don't have, you know, I love to like bike, and I love to, I don't know, engage with like, I don't know, I feel like the city is just like a very like large scale kind of like playground, and I get a lot of, I don't have like a exercise routine outside of that. Like it's just kind of the way I engage with the world, and so I'm trying to like funnel that into the work. And it's what makes it most enjoyable to me is like trying to problem solve, like, you know, which place do I need like a ladder, or like where do I need, you know, I feel like I'm like building like the side of a house or something. Like it feels very larger than me, but also like from me, and I'm really enjoying that just like experience, like corporally.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Kate, if you don't mind me asking, you had also mentioned that scale is a crucial part of some of your out of the studio practices, like the scaling of images, and I was just wondering how that bears on
Definitely
your this practice as well.
Well, yeah, I think I work at a company that does like large scale murals in the city, and part of my job is like advising the clients about like what we'll read from like far away. And so a lot of my job is like, well, if you put like this eyeball, you know, this is very like deep brick and mortar on this like landmark building, it's not going to like function well. And so I think a lot about like scenic painting and like atmospheric perspective and how things are read from far away. And I think through that, through just like digesting all that information at my job every week, like I've learned a lot about like, and I enjoy thinking about making large things that are read from far away, or like how to, I don't know, kind of like up the ante of something visual, like when you're at the opera and they like put a lot of makeup on for it to look like normal makeup. I'm just kind of thinking about that sometimes, like when I'm working, like how much can I like push this visual effect so that, you know, from far away it really like looks like graphic, or the texture reads differently from far away versus up close.
I love that because it implies that, you know, you could certainly have an intimate experience where you're like observing also the trompe l'oeil effect of, is this what I think it is? Is it challenging me, versus if I were to look at it from across the street, does it have the same effect? And am I having two different experiences? I love the opera example. Yeah.
And I would say for me, I am water. I fill the shape of my container. So when I have a larger space, I'll make larger work, and I will shrink down to fit into what I have. But I am trying to convince myself that I'm very happy at the scale, and that I'm trying to consider it like a whisper scale. Like you have to lean in to hear a whisper. Maybe this will like draw you across the room to like look a little more closely. Yeah.
But your work has a lot of presence independently. Like this piece on the left, there's something about the color that makes me like see it from across the room, certainly, but then also want to get up close and kind of examine. I found myself like kind of interacting with the stitches.
Oh, perfect.
Part. So there is a duality there, for
Great.
sure.
That's what I was hoping for, so I'm glad you said it.
Okay, very cool. So one thing that I'd love to talk about is imagery and symbolism. One thing, we've talked a little bit about materials, and I'm curious to hear what are some of the reoccurring symbols or motifs that occur in your work, and how do you see them evolving or taking on new meaning across your practice?
I think one of the things I've been working with a lot is methods of attachment. So throughout like biking and walking around the city, I think I've really been interested in like anything that I can tell is like sort of riveted together versus like welded together. And I listen to like podcasts while I'm working about like sometimes like shipwrecks or like things where like something had failed and it's because the attachment wasn't like strong. And it's just something I've been thinking about a lot and like thinking about almost in like an emotional caliber, like, you know, what causes an attachment between people or something to be brittle or like versus strong. And so I think the work is, I don't know, kind of exploring like how I can put modular pieces together, attach them in a way where like they're interdependent on one another while being like independent pieces. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that like I started that piece is the earliest with the metal snaps, and now it's kind of graduated into these like sort of little brass fasteners. And in studio now I'm working with like smaller like actual like rivets and like a rivet gun and stuff. So just kind of like doing the spectrum of attachments that way.
Can I ask what kind of drew you into that world? It seems like a very specific category of engineering.
I don't know. I think I just am following, you know, the interests, like what you're interested in and interested in listening to when you're like alone, just kind of like trusting that. And also biking around, I think, is a very big part of it. Like all of the bridges in New York have very specific ways that they were like engineered, and seeing all of the rivets and knowing like those pieces of steel are not actually glued together, they're like riveted together. So there's like areas of them that are like touching, but they're not connected. I'm not really sure what is like driving the interest, but
it's just feeling inspired by the city that you live in.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
I don't know if I have like a clear symbol throughout my work, but I do feel like the process and the way that it's made is kind of the same. It's like taking one thing or one material and then playing around with it, figuring out like, oh, okay, I like melting this plastic. What happens if I just melt a whole bunch of them? And also, even though the plastic looks the same, they melt differently, and some of them gets cloudy and some of them doesn't, and putting that together. So it's kind of the same, like I took a clothespin and played around with it, decided I liked riveting it, so I riveted it together kind of obsessively or like in a ritual. And then with the frog eggs, it was like, I like making these little marbles out of glass, so let me just make a whole bunch of them. So I think like throughout my work, it's like starting out with something that is interesting and fun and playful for me and enjoyable to do, because I don't want to make a piece where I'm like dragging my feet, you know, like that shouldn't be what art is. So yeah, I think it's very process based. So
very cool.
I think for me, I mean, you can see there's like a house in every piece. And that's sort of using that image. So this is my childhood home, and using that image started several years ago, where I was just doing these sort of like black and white, very small paintings of just like buildings that like meant something to me. So it was like this house, another house that I lived in Rockaway, the McDonald's across the street from like my high school, just like all of these things. And initially it was just about memory, like can I just paint these from memory and have them be accurate? And then it was about like what they contained. And I feel like I'm a custodian of like all of these like memories from my childhood, and thinking of these as like containers to those memories and for the spirits and all those things. And so I think that was kind of the evolution of that imagery. And the longer I work with it, the more simplified the form gets, so that it's just like a little reliquary box at this point.
Yeah, could you speak more about the way that the image has evolved between the paintings and these new, what feel like collages?
Yeah, so it's funny that you say collage because when I started making them, I would like tell friends, I'm like, yeah, I'm really making like these collages lately. And then they would see them and they're like, so you're working in textiles? And I was like, well, yes, but they're collage textiles. So,
Yeah.
but I think, I mean, there's quite a few differences. I think like the initial paintings were like very true to what the actual building looked like, and there were, there was an entrance door to the house and all of those things. And I've kind of like just hewn away the things that are less important to me, like the entrance house or like the lower like brick stringer of like the building. And I think there's like a chimney that has been lost along the way. But it's just kind of also experimenting with different ways to represent the siding. So like here I'm using organza and pleating it to make it look like siding, and here it's embroidery, and just kind of staying open and playful. Like how can I create that sort of horizontal banding in different ways, or not doing it at all on this one. So,
Nice.
yeah.
I can totally see the language of painting and drawing in the way that you use stitches, the way that things are layered in a almost like a paper cutout quality.
Yeah. I still think of them in terms of painting, like even like as I'm selecting thread color. I mean, and I'm still using paint in them. There's still an element of painting in each, but I mean, as I'm choosing like fabrics, I'm thinking of it as like putting out a palette for painting, and yeah.
Wonderful.
So I feel like it was around like 2012 that I started working cartoonishly and also using childish imagery in my work. And I feel like since then I've really kind of been working on developing a visual language, and I have a lot of symbols that have kind of persisted since then that I use a lot. Like similar to Jen, I do houses a lot, kind of a very simplified, like cartoonish house. It represents like my childhood home. And I have like, I guess one of the most common things is having like a void in the chest or stomach, and having different imagery in that void, which is meant to represent like internal versus external, like what that creature is feeling. I have a lot of different symbolism. I guess some things have kind of popped up more over the years.
I feel like your shirt matches your sculpture today.
Yeah,
Like with the void.
I do have a butterfly on that guy over there.
Oh yeah.
But I like kind of symbols that are kind of, I don't know, kind of like basic like girlhood sort of symbols, like butterfly, heart, star, sun. So I feel like, I don't know, using things that are just very common and very present in our lives, you can kind of use that and make it unique and make it your own.
Awesome, thank you so much. The next question I have is around material, choice in material, and also like choice in color palette, or perhaps whether it's on the more like let's say loud side of the color spectrum, or even like quiet and diminutive. I'm curious about how color and your choice of materials impact like emotional tone, and the way that you feel while you're making it, and the way that you anticipate it's received by others.
Okay. I really love a bright color. And I've learned over the years to try to keep it in the work and like not my clothes, because I dressed like a rainbow for like the first 30 years of my life. I joke around that like it's sad stories and like happy colors, but it's not all sad stories. There's a lot of joy in it, and I think that when I'm working through, because color is something that really like impacts my mood and improves it and that kind of thing, and just it's a little bit of dopamine. I think sometimes when I'm dealing with things that are a little bit more sad, my go-to is kind of more of a bright palette to just kind of cheer myself up in the process. Yeah, and and I think it just makes it a little bit more fun to look at too.
I feel like I don't really necessarily need my work to be colorful, because I want whatever material that I'm using to show. So if it is colorful, it's because the material itself was colorful to begin with. So I don't know, I feel like I used to make a lot of colorful work because I was interested in like figuring out the chemistry of glazes to make them different colors and textures. But once I started using craft materials or like glass, it was kind of cool to just let the material itself shine. And I think it fits because I don't know, like, I feel like it's a lot of melancholy and memory that is like feeling my work. And I don't know if like I would consider melancholy to be super colorful in my mind. So I think it makes sense.
And it's certainly allowing the kind of authenticity of the materials to breathe rather than imposing a kind of armature upon them.
Yeah, like I just want them to be what they are. And yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say colors are very important to me in my work. I definitely am very particular and very like finicky about colors, and I'm like, I really want everything to be a certain way. I mean, I feel like I've really kind of found my color palette in the last few years. So I use a lot of pastels combined with bright colors, and I feel like that kind of, I don't know, it does what I want it to do. And I feel like using the colors that I use, it does go with my work, because my work is a lot about childhood trauma. But then I feel like, but my work is also about like the conflicting emotions that you can have with trauma. So I feel like, it kind of, it creates this contrast that can be like a bit jarring, where it's like maybe the subject matter is a little dark, but the colors are so bright that it kind of like tricks people. So.
Yeah, I definitely see that, because in a way, it feels very joyful.
Yeah.
And it feels like a safe space to enter. But once you enter it, to know that it also has this kind of like a way of entering something difficult safely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'll talk about color a little bit, although I feel like that's something I'm really like grinding into at school. But I think I'm interested in like, I don't know, kind of like memories of found colors or color associations that like I just felt were really beautiful, especially in like hand-painted signs, which again has to do with my job, although that's not really like murals. It's kind of like I've met people through where I work who do signs on like oil-based enamel signs for like businesses. And you come across like older ones where like the color has worn down and you see the individual brushstrokes, which are usually like obscured when it's a fresh sign. And so that kind of relationship of like the color's opacity when it's new versus how it changes over time, I think I try to like find areas in the work where I can like capture that like transparency, because I find it just so beautiful and like poetic notion of like time passing in your environment. And I think some colors look better over the textured supports and surfaces than others. And so that's something that I think I'm like enjoying learning, and it's changing my palette a little bit as I work.
Yeah, Kate, one thing that you've mentioned in our previous conversation is that color can affect the way that you perceive the material, because, or I hope I understood you correctly, like if you were to allow raw canvas to exist as it is, it kind of betrays what it's made of. But if you paint it, maybe it is alluding to some other type of material?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Sort of the opposite of what you were saying about it's not like I'm disinterested in material authenticity, but I am interested in the way that paint itself is not just applying color, it's applying material to material. So its materiality affects the material that you're applying it, and it kind of transforms it. And so I like that like a third thing is made that has, the sort of first thing plus, whatever the vehicle of the paint is, plus whatever the pigment is. Some colors are more transparent than other colors. You can mix mediums into it and change it again. Like, I'm interested in that whole kind of like, it's like sort of like a dumb alchemy, mixing things together, seeing what it looks like.
Yeah, I love the idea that paint is applying material to material, because it kind of throws out this notion that there's something authentic, if not, especially in our context. So if we throw out authenticity, it's all, what's the message that we want to construct,
Yes.
even if that's something that's more unaltered.
Or it's all authentic, maybe even.
We could debate
Well,
this for a
sure.
long time.
Yeah.
We could, yes, we're not going to find it. But I love the open question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my next question is, well, Rose, you've mentioned that you are interested in world building, or at least I read that from your work. And I was just kind of hoping to open that question to the entire group. Do you see yourself as building a kind of personal mythology? And if so, like what stories are you exploring or writing into the future?
Yeah, I feel like I've had to do a lot of like writing and journaling to kind of figure out what I want my work to look like or what I want to use in my work. And so I think I'm still in the process of like building that world. But I think it's almost like a memoir or like a, I don't know, regurgitation or I don't know, exploration now as an adult. It's like giving a different perspective of something that I've experienced in the past. So that's kind of how the world building comes through in my work. I would love to make more weird, gloopy glass frog egg stuff, so
Please
that
do.
might be fun.
I feel like world building isn't something I feel attached to sort of in like a fleshing out, like, I don't know, like Lord of the Rings, like map. It always makes me think of that when people bring that up, and I'm like, I don't think I have, like, I'm not creating like a Sims, like.
It's not an epic.
Yeah, I'm not like, it's not like a three-dimensional, but I do feel like I'm trying to capture, like, the more I make, the more I'm trying to capture, like, the way my life feels, which is, like, I guess part of that. Like, I feel like my life feels very fast and feels very imperfect, but there are, like, moments of, like, deep, like coherence and, like, beauty or, like, poetry, and so I'm trying to, like, have the work remain authentic or, like, resolve to, like, an authentic communication of that. So I guess that is kind of how I feel about that.
Very cool.
I think I'm typically coming from a place of like world revisiting more than like world building. I feel like it's already built, and then it's already there, and I just get to go back to it. But I do also think a lot about like familial mythology, and I was even thinking about that a lot like when I was applying to law school, because you have to write these like trauma porn essays to like be accepted, and so you just like mine like generations of like every horrible thing that's ever happened in your family to be like, please let me in. And so and it worked. But I feel like in the work there's, every time I'm thinking of like a family story that kind of informs a piece, it's like the fuzzy memory is maybe embellishing here and there, and you're just creating new versions of it, or maybe it's not so much like world building or world revisiting, or just creating like new dimensions, like new side-by-side dimensions of memories and that are coexisting in some place in space.
Yeah, it's almost like being an archivist of one's own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Obviously there's we've been discussing kind of like the interiority of like what happens in the studio, and I'm very curious if we could speak to how you feel as if your work relates to the outside world. How does your work relate to to life, culturally, socially, politically, if at all?
My work is like, I do think it's very much about myself, but I do think also that like, you know, the personal can be universal, or it can become universal if it's very, you know, specific to yourself and genuine. And I mean, I do think that the things that I'm talking about in my work can relate to the, you know, overall world, because I'm dealing with like, you know, childhood trauma and like generational trauma in families, and I feel like that's something that's very relevant and that a lot of people can relate to. And I feel like, you know, unfortunately, like capitalism makes it harder for people to heal generational trauma or really have the capacity, the money, the time, you know. So I feel like it is something that's relevant.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question in my mind that it isn't relevant, but it's kind of like, what is that thread? But I can totally see how someone witnessing your work would be able to reflect on their own experiences and then maybe grapple with it as well. Have you had that kind of experience in your audience, or like what has been, have you noticed that impact?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm very like blunt and open about my experiences in life with like having like mental health issues because of childhood trauma and stuff. So I feel like a lot of people will open up to me about similar things, which is like, you know, it's an interesting experience. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like the work gives people permission to feel in a
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. That's nice.
I love the idea of like the work being more, like the more genuine you are in it, the more relatable it is to other people. I feel like that's like a main key of like making things, and can like push, like drive, I don't know, it can make your work understand you more than you understand yourself sometimes, because you're like, it feels right. I don't know why, but it does. And I feel like in my work, it's like really obviously in a real dialogue with like the environment that I'm making it in the city, and I'm like trying to look at that like at a sort of outside of myself scale, although I totally agree with Rose, it is very much like of my own experience and coming from my experience only. But I think like it is thinking about what kind of artist I am, if that's what it is. It's like I'm taking things in, and I'm thinking like the textures are getting kind of like jumbled around and attached to different emotional cues and coming back out. So I'm thinking about like what the work might do for other people is like some things that you just like think of as like monotonous or like designed around you, sort of like pulling the raw material out of it and like thinking about what that material like actually is doing in that sort of like abstraction way. I could see the work, like sometimes I think about if I was like installed outside or something, how it might react to like materials around it that are doing different things than the materials are doing in the work.
That's so interesting, because in a way you're giving like a heightened sensitivity to the built environment, so it would perhaps make someone more aware of their own, the infrastructure of a city and the relationship to it.
I feel like that's also like the job of like artists in society, is to like kind of like pause like the jet stream of like experience to make you like think about things like in relativity to other things a little more than you would like otherwise. So
Absolutely.
I feel like I always struggle with like, I know you just said all of like, there's no question if our work is relevant or not, but I always struggle with questions similar to this, because I feel like innately we all like make our art for ourselves because we just feel like we need to express things. So the first thing I think about is like I don't know, just like the political scape of craft, and how like a lot of men are highlighted, but a lot of it's seen as like lesser than if it's done by like a queer person or like a woman. So that's the first thing I think about. So just us making this work, I think, is like already in itself political and revolutionary in a way. Yeah, and I don't know, I try not to think too hard about it because if I do, I will make the work. Yeah, I'll crash out. I will crash out. And I have like other friends that are like, us making the art, and even like an old like professor and mentor, I remember he said like, this work is no longer about you once you put it out in the world. And even though the intention and it did come from us, but I kind of like that once it's out in the world for other people to see, they get to relate to it, kind of like, Rose, what you were saying, because then it takes that, I don't know, it's like, oh, I am making this, and someone is like, I don't know.
Bearing
like,
witness.
Yeah, exactly. Or like
Totally.
relating to it, or like maybe
Yeah.
being influenced by it. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how, I think about that. But
Beautiful. Yeah.
And for me, in this particular hellscape that we're currently living in with ICE raids, etc., I think a big part of my family mythology is how my dad came here from Costa Rica, and when my mom was giving birth to me, he got picked up in a diner raid because they do it again, so this isn't actually like an odd thing to explain to people, but back in the 70s, they would just like go to diners and round up everyone from the kitchen and bring them down to INS and figure out if you're gonna get deported or not. But my mom was giving birth to an American child, so he got sent home. So I am an anchor baby, and I think that is part of the work, and just like, I don't necessarily think that's something you can read in the work, but like part of the home symbology is also just like the house is the anchor, and just like the fact that I'm here making work, like the world can split in a million different ways, and the universe can splinter and all those things, and just like by sheer luck I'm here making work, and that in and of itself feels political to me. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like I could relate to that, Jen, as like a Asian American, because a lot of the reason why I am delving into the childhood and stuff of it all is because of like, there is like the childhood trauma of it, but there's also like where is my home even, which I know a lot of AAPI folks, like that's what we all think about, because when I go back to Taiwan, I'm like, wait a minute, this is so nostalgic and familiar, and I'm home, and I come back here, I'm like, where am I? But also I'm home, but also I'm not. So it's, like kind of a reclaiming, or like,
And I think that's another reason why this house itself is so important to me, because like that was the safe space, because like where we lived was so hostile. So like we were like the only brown family like for blocks and blocks around. I'm from Rockaway in South Queens. And so the house itself felt like home base, like you're safe. Like once you're behind the door, everything is kosher. So yeah.
Wow, thank you. Okay, so I have one more question for the group, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So please put your thoughts together if you want to ask a question. So the last question I have is kind of taking a step back, considering the big picture. And in the course of your practice as an artist, making work, can you share a kind of breakthrough moment that got you from where you thought there was a distinct like before and after? And this could be materially, emotionally, at any level.
I was talking about this outside with some people, but last year I saw a Ron Gorchov show, and I was reading this like old essay that he wrote about jerry-rigging objects, and like making them, the point of making them is just to make them in the process and not to make them like towards perfection. And I like went into the wood shop for the first time like that week, because I was like, I don't need to, I just felt very like intimidated by like the practice I would have to make like a single nice wood structure before I would feel comfortable, and that just erased all of the insecurity I had in it overnight. Just like gave me permission to try. So that really helped. Yeah.
I think for me, I'm still in grad school for education, and so having kind of a break from making stuff in the last couple of years, but trying my best to do it over the summers has been, I think it allowed me to kind of think my work. And this summer, I got to go to a craft school in North Carolina called Penland School of Craft, and I got a scholarship to work with one of the flame artists there.
Oh, what's a flame artist?
Flame artist is, she does glass, but it's not like the giant rod in the furnace, which is actually called a glory hole. So,
Noted.
but it's like a table torch, and she taught us how to like rage in the flame, and I think that was like really cathartic. And if you ever try glass and someone is shouting the directions at you and like of how to do it, it's great. It's like
What does it mean to rage in the flame?
you just gotta turn the torch
Oh, you just
up.
gotta run straight at it.
You can't be afraid of the flame. You just gotta like stand close to it and like let it blow. Because a lot of our torches were too small, and that's actually bad for the torch itself. And you're not gonna melt any glass. So she really like went from 0 to 100, but that's the only way we could learn. And I think that was like a really good like direction for me to be like, don't be afraid, just make the thing and then see what happens.
Very cool.
Totally. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I had like a couple changes to my practice in grad school, just because of like having the time and the space. It was like the first time I've had a studio really like in my life. So that was that brought about a couple changes, I guess, in terms of like making something larger and working with textiles, because that was kind of when I brought textiles into my practice. So I feel like it also made me more kind of confident and sure of my instincts with art, because I feel like especially in grad school you have so many people like being like, oh, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, and I feel like it's a good kind of opportunity to be like, you know, no, I know what I want and you're wrong.
Amen. Very good.
Yeah, but I feel like I definitely like maintained the aesthetic that I already had, maybe even like made it stronger, but also opened myself up to different possibilities in terms of like working larger and textiles. And also like I kind of learned more about, I think one professor was like, oh, one way of working larger is just making like a lot of small things.
Cool.
So that's like something that I think about, like, you know, I can make like collections of sculptures, or I can make things that go on the wall, or there's just like a lot of different ways that I can work. And so I like having those different possibilities.
Very cool.
And I think for me, the big breakthrough has been working in the fabric and textiles. It feels like a real marriage between the content and the material. And it just kind of makes sense with the themes in a way that it maybe wasn't in my handling of paint. I mean, paint can do a million things, and I love paint, and I think it's great. But I think for me, it was almost like a default material. And I don't think that I was able to tell the stories in quite the same way with the same facility as I'm able to in the textiles. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to open it up. Does anyone have a question for our artists? Okay, let me give you this.
So there was a point when you didn't use foil and rivets.
It's true.
And so what you said about the way things connect, and that, you know, the relationship to the rivets and the, so what about, could you translate that backwards and see what the same impulse was before? I don't think it could have been just a you know, something, you know, that happened.
Top one, Robert. Well, that piece is canvas and is definitely like the step before, because it was like metal snaps instead. But I feel like that came from kind of like a resource of the canvas. I knew I wanted to make like cut up pieces. Like I had pieces of canvas and I was enjoying the shapes of them. And I think it was like an aversion to like glue. I didn't want to using adhesive with the canvas seemed stupid. I didn't know anything about hand sewing. It didn't like that didn't feel particularly, you know, heavy to me. I think I was just looking sort of like blindly around for something that like felt interesting to me, and rhythmic also. I think drawing, it's kind of like a drawing line that has like a rhythm to it. Like that is, once you see that in the painting, you start seeing it everywhere in real life. Like there's like a real rhythm to building things that has this kind of modularity to it. And this, it's like not a perfect rhythm, but if you do enough of it, it sort of reads as perfect because they're all sort of similar. Does that answer the question? All right, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question for everyone.
Okay.
Hello. Just building off of the idea of modularity, I think in all of them there's a sense of modularity if it's like the way things are kind of placed or hung, or the way things, maybe there's an implication of being hung differently. So I'm just curious for everyone where that fits into your idea of the work and your practice.
The clothespin piece, it was installed in a different show and it was installed completely differently. The piece can actually, you can move it and you can move it around. And I can also disconnect it and expand it on it if I want to in the studio. So I think it's called Wanna Play. So I think that fits into like the idea of the piece of it being installed in different ways. And I just had Daphne go play around with it, and so that's kind of been fun to see like how people in like the curator's hands, how they see the work and relate to it. So I like that modularity. I would love to like do more modular pieces.
For me, the work kind of gets made in phases where like I will make a little patch that says grape teeth, and then like 3 months later I will make a little house with a wave underneath it, and then I just kind of have these like piles of like things, and then eventually I see 2 of them and I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense together, and then it kind of patchworks from there. Yeah.
I guess with the 2 pieces that I have, they have been different every time that I've shown them, which is cool, because of all the little guys. It's like I don't really necessarily have one set way of showing it, but I think it's nice that like every time I show it, it's something new.
Yeah, I agree with that somewhat, although my work is not rearrangeable. It is technically, like, you can take that one apart and put it back together. It's not like a part of the way I would show it, but I think it's kind of the same thing as the paint being a material. It's like actually you're putting things together every time you make anything. So everything, I think, inherently has a level of modularity to it, because it's like unit, third unit that you're making. But it does seem like everyone in this show is interested in like capturing essences and like piecemeal things, and then like creating an overarching thing. So that's a good point.
Anyone else?
What's up, Chris?
Yes.
Can you just discuss the significance of the snake in your work?
Yes, so the snake, another story about my dad and family mythology. So part of the way my dad got the funds together to come to the States, he's from Costa Rica, was that he worked on one of the United Fruits plantations catching coral snakes. And so the deal was that for every coral snake head you turned into the plantation managers, you would get $1. And this was like in the 1960s. So $1 in Costa Rica was a lot of money. And he would just like build these traps and then just kind of like lay back and let them collect. And then he would turn them in. So for me, the snake always represented like capitalism, where it's like dazzling and beautiful and deadly. So it's that kind of image for me. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
I'm gonna get one last call. Anyone? Question? All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, the train.
Oh, the grain.
Train,